Can you see the
Yes, sir.
screen? Yeah.
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. So today I'll be speaking on the topic that has been the title. And today I will not talk in a specialist language. I will try to reach out to as many students as possible, and I'm pretty much aware that most students of the department would not know the nitty-gritty details of A, nonlinear dynamics, and B, the class of systems that I'll be talking about. So I'll try to be as talk as initio as possible. And the plan of my talk is that first I will outline a few basic concepts in nonlinear dynamics that will be needed for understanding the later part of the lecture, with the understanding that the listener may not have attended the course in nonlinear dynamics. If one has, then it's better, but I'll not assume that. And as you know, I come from engineering background, and much of my work has been in engineering. And my entry into the subject has been through engineering problems, but you are not expected to be exposed to that class of problems. So I'll introduce that. And I'll talk about the course of events that led to the discovery that I'll be talking about. And then I'll talk about the characteristic of the general class of systems for which this is applicable. And then I'll give a very brief outline of some of the results in the theory of border collision bifurcations, to the extent possible within a span of about 40-45 minutes. Okay, so let's start. First, I'll talk about the basic concepts. Now, whenever there is any change in any system, that is called dynamics. And if the system description is nonlinear, its dynamics will be nonlinear dynamics. The system description can be of essentially two types. First are the systems are described by a set of differential equations, which are called flows, or these are described by a set of algebraic equations, which are called maps. In case of differential equations, the rate of change of each variable x, y, z are given as some function of x, y, z, while in the case of maps, it is at one point and that maps to another point. So xn, yn, zn is the present point, which maps to next point xn plus 1, yn plus 1, zn plus 1, and that is given by some functional form. Now, investigations in dynamics has revealed that there are some qualitatively different dynamical behaviors. There can be a behavior which is stable equilibrium point, which means that any deviation from that will progressively move close to that point and ultimately converge onto that point. That's a stable equilibrium point. Here's an incoming behavior which is spiraling inward. Sometimes the spiraling inward behavior becomes spiraling outward behavior, but that is a local description. Globally, it can still remain incoming spiral, in which case a stable periodic behavior develops. If there is any deviation from that, perturbation from that towards the inside, that goes outward to convert onto that that cyclic behavior, or if it is outside, still it converges, and so it is called a limit cycle. And there can be various different types of limit cycles. There can be limit cycle that looks like this, or there can be limit cycles that have 2 loops, there can be limit cycles that have 3 loops, and so on and so forth. And there can also be limit cycles with no defined number of loops, in the sense that it doesn't repeat itself. Non-repetitive pattern, which is called chaos. So this is a typical example of a chaotic trajectory in the phase space of the Lorentz system. So the chaos is characterized by non-repetitive, as I say, or aperiodic behavior, and it is also characterized by something called sensitive dependence on initial condition, which means that if you take two very close initial conditions, they progressively move far apart. But even though they progressively move far apart, the system does not collapse because it folds. I'll not come into those nitty-gritty details. The fourth type of dynamics I'll talk about is what is known as dynamics on the surface of a torus. This is actually a combination of two frequencies. There can be more number of frequencies, but it is a combination of two frequencies, one along this direction and another in that direction. And if these two frequencies are commensurate, then the orbit will actually be periodic. But if they are incommensurate, that's the ratio is irrational number, then it will fill up the torus. And that way, this kind of behavior is called a quasi-periodic behavior. So I have said 4 types of behavior. It is this one. The first one is a stable equilibrium point. The second one is a stable limit cycle. Third one is a chaotic behavior. And fourth one is a quasi-periodic behavior. So if there are qualitatively different types of dynamical behavior, then it is possible that as a parameter is varied, then it transits from one behavior to another. And that is normally studied by a method called point intersection, where we place an imaginary plane in the phase space and observe only where the orbit pierces the plane. So the way I have shown in the schematic picture. So if you are an ant sitting on that plane, then you will see a point mapping to a point, something like this. A point mapping to a point, and that will be represented by a map. So you can see a flow description can be reduced to a map description, and then it leads to relatively easier way of analysis. So we normally analyze dynamical systems by deriving the maps of physical systems that are represented by a set of differential equations. But they're actually the same thing. So whenever we are talking about maps, you have to keep in mind that actually the things are represented by a set of differential equations, but these are easier representation of that. The dynamical character of the system is accurately represented by its equivalent dynamical character on the Poincare section. So if it is a periodic orbit, then you will see only one point on the Poincare section. If it is a period 2 orbit, then you will see 2 points on the Poincare section. If it is then going around without repeating itself, it is obvious that you will see an infinite number of points on the Poincare section, and that infinite number of points will form some kind of a structure. Looks nice. For example, this one. This is the Ikeda map, whose attractor is like this. And if you have a quasi-periodic orbit, then if you place a Poincare section, you will see a loop. So if we are studying Poincare sections, we are studying maps, and we see a point, we know that in the equivalent dynamical system represented by differential equations, it has one loop, or it's a period 1 orbit. In the second case, it is a period 2 orbit, which will have 2 points on the Poincare section. Infinite number of points on the Poincare section will be representing a chaotic orbit, or infinite number of points, but located on a loop. A circle, not exactly a circle, but a loop, will be representing a quasi-periodic orbit. Now, normally, whenever you transit from one kind of behavior to another, there is a qualitative change. If you change the parameter and the behavior changes from this to this, or this to this, then obviously this is a qualitative change in the behavior. So whenever there is a qualitative change in the behavior, it is called a bifurcation. And bifurcations are normally studied by plotting what are known as bifurcation diagrams. In this diagram, the parameter is in the x-axis, and the discrete variable is plotted on the y-axis. So if it is a period 1 orbit, there is only one point, and for that parameter value, repeatedly it will fall on a single point, so you will see exactly 1 point. And as you change the parameter, you see that point, and finally, at some point, you see that something has happened. That one point has now bifurcated into 2 points. This is called a period doubling bifurcation. And that way, you can see in this picture a period doubling cascade, which ultimately leads to an infinite periodicity or a smudge of dots, which is called chaos. So by looking at it, you can get in one shot a panoramic view of the dynamics of that particular system. This is of the logistic map, very, very simple map. You don't need to get into that right now. I just wanted to show you that a normal bifurcation diagram looks more or less like this. There would be some ranges of parameters over which periodic orbits would occur. There would be certain range of parameters where chaotic orbits might occur or quasi-periodic orbits might occur. And there would also be such gaps in which you find certain periodic orbits called periodic windows. So this is the usual status of the bifurcation diagram. And these have been studied since the 1960s, so people knew very well how this happened. The way to analyze this normally is that if there is whenever there is a bifurcation, it is normally characterized by some kind of a loss of stability. Something was stable, it lost stability, and something else became stable. So here there was a period 1 orbit that was stable, it lost stability, and something else became stable. So the crux of the thing is to study the stability of the fixed point, and that is normally studied by looking at the local linear neighborhood of the fixed point, where it is characterized by the Jacobian matrix, and if the eigenvalues of the Jacobian matrix is smaller than 1 in magnitude, then it is stable, the fixed point is stable, and when it loses stability, it means that this condition is violated. And it's easy to see that there are exactly 3 ways by which this condition can be violated. Stability condition can be violated. Either an eigenvalue can exit the unit circle, this is the unit circle, can exit the unit circle through the negative real line, or it can exit the unit circle through the positive real line, or it can exit the unit circle when the eigenvalues are complex conjugate. 3 possible ways. And this is what is known as the period doubling bifurcation. This is what is known as the saddle node bifurcation. And this is what is known as the Nymark-Sackett bifurcation. So these things were well known in the nonlinear dynamics community. So with that, let us now talk about what I was doing at that time. As you know, my background is in electrical engineering, and I was at that time, I'm talking about the time like 1994, 95, 96, that kind of time, when I was experimenting with a class of systems called power electronic systems. What are power electronic systems? Whenever you have power available at a certain voltage and frequency, and you need it at a different voltage and frequency, then the interface is provided by power electronic systems. So it converts power from one level to another level. I'll illustrate how this is done for some very simple systems. For example, inside your computer, there is something called a switch mode power supply. It takes the power at 220 volt AC and gives the power at 5 volt DC, right? So there is a transformer that brings down the voltage. After that, there is a rectifier that rectifies the voltage. And then you have to have something that brings down the voltage to 5 volt. And at the same time, irrespective of the fluctuation in the power in the line, it has to keep that voltage constant. How to do that? These kind of systems actually comprises switches. Switches embodied by transistors, thyristors, MOSFETs, diodes. So these are switches. And there are storage elements, inductors and capacitors, which store power for some time and then give it back to the system. So this power electronic circuits essentially comprise these kind of simple elements. Let's talk about one important point is that very few people in the engineering community knew that all power electronic circuits are nonlinear systems because of the existence of a switch. Switch is a nonlinear element, so you can help it. So if this is a nonlinear system, one does expect to see nonlinear behavior. So I was at that time investigating what kind of nonlinear behaviors are observed in such systems. Let me illustrate one simple type of system. It is called a buck converter, something that converts a higher voltage to a lower voltage, higher voltage at the input end, lower voltage at the output end. And what is done is essentially there is a switch that switches on and off, say 50,000 times per second. And as a result, at this point, you will see sometimes the voltage applied, this voltage coming, and sometimes not coming. And then here is a LC filter that filters that voltage into a relatively smoother output voltage. The output voltage will have some ripple, but it is relatively smoother output voltage. But then, how to decide when to switch it on and off? That has to be decided by some kind of a feedback loop, because this output voltage needs to be kept constant. So what is done is this voltage is sensed, and then it is this is a potential divider. So here you get a voltage proportional to this voltage, and it is fed into an op-amp with a reference voltage at the other end. So what you get here is a constant times the difference between these two voltages. It's a differential amplifier. Let's forget about this item for now, because it is the controller, which I'll not talk about. So here you have a sense the control voltage is actually a difference between these two voltages amplified by some factor. And then that is compared with a ramp voltage like this. So if you compare with the ramp voltage, then you see let this be the control voltage and this be the ramp voltage. So whenever the control voltage is below the ramp voltage, the switch is turned on, and when it is above the ramp voltage, it is turned off. You can see that if this voltage goes up, then the on time will automatically reduce, and as a result of it will bring it down. If it goes down, it will automatically be brought up. So it gives a stable output voltage, irrespective of what the input voltage is. And that is used everywhere. Your laptop has some 20 of them. Just imagine that the SMPS gives a 5-volt supply, but your microprocessor takes 0.8 volt in some cases, 1.2 volt in some other cases, and that has to be kept constant irrespective of which program you're running or how much the microprocessor is consuming power. These are done by these kind of systems. So I was doing experiments I was investigating the dynamics of this kind of systems as a parameter. For example, the input voltage is fed. In those days, there was no digital storage oscilloscope. It was only analog oscilloscopes. And what we found in simulation was that nominal periodic behavior would be something like this. So this is a ripple in the control voltage, and this is the triangular wave voltage. So it will be normal behavior. But if the input voltage varies beyond a certain value, then this happens, which means that if there is a bifurcation and it becomes a period 2 behavior. And as the input voltage is varied further, it develops chaos. I'll show you the experimental CRO trace. It's like this. So the system apparently went from period 1 behavior, which is the normal behavior, period 2 behavior to chaotic behavior. So it appears to be the normal sequence that I showed you earlier in the bifurcation diagram. But still, I wanted to test. In those days, there was no method of obtaining a bifurcation diagram in an experiment. So we had to invent a method of plotting bifurcation diagrams. What we did was we would generate pulses at these points. It's easy to do that, and get in details. Pulses, and those pulses would be fed in a Z modulation port at the back of the CRO, which means that the waveform will be sampled, at that point, and then we would feed the input voltage on the x-axis and this sampled value in the y-axis. And then if we vary the input voltage slowly, then it will move along the x-axis. And if there's 1 point, it will show 1 point. If there are 2 points, it will show 2 points, and so on. But then it just goes, and then you cannot store it. So we would come pretty late at night, switch off all the lights in the corridor everywhere, switch off all the lights. One person would change the voltage, another person will stand with the camera, and then camera would be long exposure camera. For a long time, it will be done, and finally the camera roll would be given to the shop to expose, and finally we'll get the pictures as printouts a week later, and then we'll see what the result of the experiment was. And these are, okay, I forgot, these are the CRO traces of the period 2 orbit and the chaotic orbit. So when we did the experimental work on the bifurcation diagrams, these revealed certain strange things. For example, we saw bifurcation diagrams, again, obtained the way I just mentioned, which means analog oscilloscope, you take long exposure camera pictures and then developed by usual photo developers. And then this definitely does not look like the way we presented. I presented earlier the bifurcation diagram. This is another. So the buck converter showed this kind of bifurcation structures, and another converter, the boost converter, showed this kind of bifurcation structures. These definitely do not look like the bifurcation diagrams that people were studying at those times. Well, I was just an engineer, so I didn't have much idea about the nitty-gritty details of nonlinear dynamics, nor was I a physicist or a mathematician to really explore this. So I wrote to different people across the globe saying that this is what I'm getting. Can you help me explain this? What is happening? Well, most people say that we don't know what is happening. The most advanced group on chaos theory was at Maryland, and there somebody called Celso Grebochi wrote to me saying that this looks interesting. Why don't you come here? Let's explore this. But he said that you have to arrange your own mind. So I applied to the Boys Cast Fellowship, got the fellowship, and went there for, I got leave for 4 months, spent some time in University of Maryland. So when digital storage oscilloscopes became available, these could be plotted in a more better way, and these are 2 such bifurcation diagrams obtained using digital storage oscilloscopes. This is for the buck converter, this is for the boost. Well, so now talk about the course of events. So when I visited, for some time I spent at the University of Surrey, who did some work on such phenomena in power electric systems. No clue, I got no clue. Then I visited the University of Maryland for about 2 months. Those 2 months also, they had no clue. Finally, I was to come back without a clue what is happening in the systems. In an act of desperation, I took a step. The step was that in Maryland, there was a practice that every Thursday, there would be a talk over pizza lunch. So I requested that I want to give a talk. I want to give a talk on something I don't know. So they agreed, and then I gave a talk and told about those systems because they also do not know. They're mathematicians basically. And then I said that this is what I'm getting. Can you just explain what this is? There was no answer from the house. But after the talk, Jim York, who actually named the word chaos and all that, so he's a big shot in the field, he came to me and say that, Banerjee, come and see me at 3 o'clock in my office. I went to him. He said that, when are you going back home? I said, tomorrow. You are going back tomorrow. Why don't you stay back? I said, I cannot, I teach. Then he said, okay, in that case, this cannot be solved within a day or 2. You come back next year, next summer. I'll arrange the money. So I went back next summer. It was 1997. And during that visit, we managed to work out that these were a new class of bifurcations on which only a couple of papers have been published, that too by mathematicians, and that too in a way of let there be a map like this and let's find out what it does. So the way mathematicians argue, not based on any system, but they saw that these kind of maps will behave in a peculiar way, and that's what all that has been done so far. And when we investigated that time in 1997, we realized that this was what the system that we were studying were the first known examples of this whole class of bifurcation, that they had published only a couple of papers so far. And so I published these two papers in that year, 1997, during the stay there. And then I came back. After I came back, I again looked at my bifurcation diagrams and tried to tally with what they know, and found that most of the bifurcations that we were observing cannot be explained by the theory that they had developed. So I then wrote to them that I only know that these are border collisions, all right, but cannot explain. So let us go on to develop the theory further. Well, it was a group comprising 3 people, Ott, Gravogy, and York. They had a discussion, and finally Ott wrote to me that no, we are not interested in doing this because it is too complicated problems. Why is it too complicated problem? But at the crux of the problem was that there was only one person who knew what it was, that was me. And I was neither a physicist nor a mathematician. Therefore, it was assumed that it's impossible for me to develop that. And so they said that, fine, we are not doing this. Well, I was then alone, nobody around who I can talk to. I just wrote to Gravogy, if I do something and request you to check whether I'm talking sense or not, will you check? He said, okay, that much I can do. So the situation at the end of 97 was that we had found that these are a class of bifurcations, a new class of bifurcations, but the theory of that class of bifurcations were nowhere close to explaining what we were observing. So then I went ahead to investigate that class of systems. So let us now talk about the class of systems, what this class does. It is actually the power electronic circuits that we are studying is a member of a class of dynamical systems which are called switching dynamical systems. And the character is that there are differential equations defining their evolution, but the differential equations, there are switching events that change the differential equations. So it evolves by a set of differential equations, then a switching is there. Then it evolves by another set of differential equations, then another switching is there, and this keeps on happening. This class of systems is switching dynamical systems, and whenever there is such a discrete event like switching, that changes the system description. Now, later we found that this is very common, but nevertheless, here this phase space structure would be that the phase space would be divided into compartments. For example, here is a compartment, here is another compartment given by different functional forms of the right-hand side of the differential equations. And the phase space is divided by what is known as a switching manifold. And the switching manifold is so there are different functional forms applicable to different parts of the phase space, and these are separated by algebraic equations of this form. This is the general structure, mathematical structure of subsystems that I was investigating. Now, what happens there? A large number of physical systems actually fall in that category. And it so happened, I was fortunate that we were investigating the first such systems, the power electronic circuits. But any system involving relays has this character. Impacting mechanical systems have this character. Systems involving dry friction, stick-slip kind of motion have this character. Nonlinear circuits like Colpitt's oscillator, closed circuit have this character. Walking robots have this character. And then hydraulic systems with on-off valves definitely have this character because the on-off valve switch. And human heart is also an example of system with on-off valves. So that also falls in this category. And continuous systems controlled by discrete logic. And later we found more examples. So it is actually a huge number of systems, mostly studied in engineering, but also in physics. And the theory to explain the bifurcation dynamic behavior observed in such system was not known at that time. So what happens is that in such a system, there can be a periodic orbit entirely contained in one compartment. And there can also be periodic orbits that goes and transits from one compartment to another and then goes back. So there can be a periodic orbit like this. And then if you now place a Poincare section, then you will observe how it goes from one point on the Poincare section to the next point on the Poincare section. And it can be an evolution wholly contained in one compartment, or it can go pierce the switching manifold, go to the other side and come back. Obviously, the functional form in this case will be different from the functional form in this case. So naturally, the discrete time structure of the system would become like this, where the discrete time phase space is divided into compartments and defined by different functional forms of the map and separated by a borderline. And the borderline is the one so that this orbit will just graze the switching manifold. So that will define the borderline. So this is the general structure of the systems. Now, what happens is, if there is a fixed point sitting here and you are changing a parameter, then the eigenvalues may change and it can undergo a bifurcation. In that case, it will be one of the bifurcations that is known. But it's also possible that as you change the parameter, the fixed point moves, its position shifts, and at some point it crosses the border or hits the border, collides with the border. When that happens, the Jacobian elements abruptly change. And naturally, what can happen is that in a smooth system, the Jacobian element, Jacobian matrix eigenvalues can smoothly exit the unit circle, while in a non-smooth system like this, the eigenvalues can discretely, abruptly jump across the unit circle. And the reason that the Maryland people said that we are afraid of tackling this problem is that it can go from any place to any place. So it's a zoo of things that can happen. So I was left alone to handle this kind of a difficult problem, and somehow we managed to pin it. So what actually happens in the class of system that we were investigating experimentally was that in a switching dynamical system, the bifurcation sequence will be a complex interplay between smooth bifurcations and such border collision bifurcations. Whenever this happens, we call it border collision bifurcation. The different types of smooth bifurcations were well known at that time. But what are the different types of border collision bifurcations? That was pretty much unknown. And the problem was compounded by the fact that the answer to this question depends on the character of the borderline as well as the character of the functions of the two sides. And the character of the borderline means it can be continuous, it can be discontinuous. And in the either side of the border, it can be one-dimensional map, it can be two-dimensional map, it can be three-dimensional map, it can be higher-dimensional map, or it can also have singularities in the function. What then? That is why the problem was actually pretty difficult to handle, but we had a long time to handle these problems. So now I'll come briefly to the theory of border collision bifurcations. What we did was that we, whenever the fixed point collides or goes from one side to another side, we look at only the local linear neighborhood of that. So this side is linearized, this side is linearized, and then if we do a set of change of coordinates, then it can be cast in this form. Therefore, the Jacobian matrices on the two sides are now cast so that they have only two parameters, the trace and the determinant. So the task was simplified into figuring out what happens for different values of the trace and the determinant, or in more accurate terms, how does the trace compare with the determinant. That's because the kind of fixed point is determined by how the trace compares with the determinant. If the trace is less than this, then it would be the eigenvalue will be placed here, so it's a flip saddle. If it is like this, then it will be a flip attractor. Flip means one eigenvalue is negative, and so on and so forth. So different types of fixed points are characterized by how the trace compares with the determinant. So essentially, our task was to work out the asymptotically stable orbits, depending on which type of fixed point collides with the border and comes out as which type. It will become different. So we published a series of papers on that. And this paper has actually gone on to be quite famous, because that's where we introduced the concept of robust chaos. Normally, chaotic behavior is not robust. There are periodic windows inside chaotic behaviors, but we found that in such systems, there can be robust chaos, so that even if you change a parameter, it doesn't come out of chaos. Anyway, let me briefly state what these are. So what we did was, we partitioned the parameter space depending on which type of fixed point hits the border and becomes fixed type. That was the primary partitioning. And then we found that in each box, it's a particular type of fixed point going into a particular type, but the behavior inside the box will not be the same. We found that they are not the same, and so we had to do some secondary partition. And finally, we could see that there are grossly three types written here as A, B, and C in three major compartments: A here, B here, and C here. Here is the trace of the left-hand side. Here is the trace of the right-hand side, and this is how the trace compares with the determinant of the left-hand side and the right-hand side. So depending on that, we make this. So let me just briefly give what we found. The scenario A, that means this part. Normal is that a fixed point remains fixed. A stable fixed point remains stable. This is a normal case. But we found that there is also a possibility that at the bifurcation point, another periodic orbit would be born. Now, here is as you change the parameter mu, there was a fixed point whose position was changing and it hit the border. After the border collision, it still remained stable, but another stable periodic orbit came into existence. When that happens, what happens close to the border? Where the distance between the two stable behaviors is arbitrarily small, and any physical system has some noise in it. So depending on the noise, there will be a fundamental uncertainty as to which orbit this attractor will ultimately follow as you change the parameter. It can follow this orbit or it can follow this orbit. It's a fundamental source of uncertainty. This is called multiple attractor bifurcation. We found that there's another class of bifurcation where the fixed point remains stable, but the system collapses. Why? Because this stable periodic behavior has a basin of attraction, the set of initial conditions from which it is attracted to that fixed point. Now that basin of attraction collapses to zero size at the point of bifurcation. A group in Maryland termed it as dangerous border collision bifurcation, because that was, again, an electrical engineering group. They noticed it. Dangerous because a group in control theory, that normally we keep track of the eigenvalues of the system, and therefore when eigenvalues are stable, we are happy. The things will be normal. But then here we have a situation where the eigenvalues are stable, and therefore we have no inkling as to the system is going to collapse, and but still it collapses. And then we worked out why this happens and how this happens. For example, we worked out this, that the fixed point that was stable remained stable. There was a period 3 orbit, and the basin of attraction of this fixed point was provided by the stable manifold of this period 3 orbit. And as you approach the mu is equal to 0 condition, a everything collapses at this point, and therefore the basin of attraction also collapses to zero size. Everything goes to infinity. And yet, as it changes mu further, it remains stable. In the scenario B, where two fixed points are born, like the saddle node bifurcation, where a pair of fixed points are born, one stable, another unstable. A non-smooth saddle node bifurcation would look like something like this: a stable and an unstable branch. Normally, in a saddle node bifurcation, they would go at 90 degrees, but here it is at acute angle. But that's minor issue. But we found that in a non-smooth system, many things can happen that cannot happen in a smooth system. For example, a period 2 orbit can be born out of nothing. Here there is no fixed point, and then a period 2 orbit is born, or two unstable fixed points are born. Now, when two unstable fixed points are born, there is a possibility that there will be a trapping region between them, so that there will be a chaotic behavior developing out of nothing, because there was no fixed point here. For negative values of mu, there is no fixed point, and a chaotic orbit develops out of nothing. And then we found that there are also situations, depending on the values of the trace and the determinant, where a fixed point hits the border, comes and hits the border, and loses stability. When it loses stability in a usual, say, the logistic map, a period 2 orbit develops. Here also a similar thing happens. It becomes unstable, and a period 2 orbit develops. So this is a period doubling in a non-smooth system. And it can also be supercritical or subcritical, so that it becomes unstable, but a period 2 orbit exists in the same site as this. When it becomes unstable, a period 2 as well as another period 3 orbit, so multiple attractor bifurcation can also happen in this case. There can also be a period 3 orbit, which is coexisting with the period 1 orbit, and then nothing happens after that. That means system simply collapses. It cannot stabilize onto some other behavior. You can have a direct generation of chaos. If you recall the experimental bifurcation that I showed, we saw phenomena like this, where a periodic orbit directly becomes, without going through a period doubling cascade, directly becomes a chaotic orbit. So we then explained why this happens and how this happens. And there can also be coexisting attractor existing along with the chaotic orbit. So this is only for the system. This is also there can be a part of a torus out of the border collision. So which means that a fixed point comes, hits the border, and then what is born is a loop. And this loop has a number of fixed points on it. This is a stable fixed point, this is unstable fixed point, stable fixed point, unstable fixed point, and so on and so forth, forming a loop. That means the stable manifolds form a loop. Or it can be a what is known as ergodic torus, which means that it is a quasi-periodic orbit, two frequencies incommensurate with each other, that can also be born out of a border collision. And all these where what I just described is just a two-dimensional piecewise group map which is continuous. And there are plethora of other things, other possibilities that waited to be investigated. For example, we had to investigate what happens if the system is one-dimensional and continuous, one-dimensional and discontinuous, two-dimensional continuous, two-dimensional and discontinuous, and with the singularity at the border. That's called a square root singularity. If the function has a square root term in one side, then it will have a square root singularity. Something that happens actually in impacting systems. Then it can have two different dimensionalities in two sides of the border. There are situations where the map is not invertible, and we also had to investigate what happens in 3D and higher dimensional systems, because many physical systems were found to be of that category. So all these actually we have slowly over the years developed. Not all by ourselves, in collaboration with various groups worldwide. After that initial work, I have not collaborated with the Maryland group any further, but other groups in Germany, in France, in New Zealand, and England, and in US also. They have collaborated with me to develop the theory. Ultimately, now I can say that the theory of border collision bifurcation is reasonably well developed, so that it has been it is now routinely used to explain the phenomena, nonlinear phenomena that are observed in an array of physical systems, including switching circuits, impacting mechanical systems, economic systems. For example, notebandi is a non-smooth event, right? So in economics, you have mostly non-smooth phenomena. One budget, the tax increases discontinuously. Therefore, the dynamical equations change. So economic people have been using our theories regularly to explain what they observe. Ecological systems. For example, if you have a system where the Hilsa fish in Ganges will be fished only if the number, the density, is beyond a threshold. If it goes below, then fishing will be banned. Suppose you have a system like this. In fact, systems like this are there in most countries. We don't have it. If you do that, then it becomes a non-smooth system. And naturally, people had to study using our theory. Even cardiac dynamics, before a person has a heart attack, it goes through a process called cardiac alternance. It's a dig heartbeat. So it becomes one small heartbeat, one long heartbeat, again a small heartbeat, one long heartbeat. The nonlinear dynamics people easily identify that as a period doubling, but people found that it is not a smooth period doubling. It's a border collision kind of period doubling. And so that theory also was used in explaining what happens in the human heart. So with that, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an interesting and stimulating talk. We'll be taking questions now. So people can just unmute themselves or send them over the chat.
Yes.
Soumitra Rongit here. Very
Yes.
nice talk. So, I mean, apart from the heartbeat dynamics and, you have other physical systems where this kind of border collision bifurcation dynamics shows up?
Well, wherever there is a possibility that if a condition is reached, the system equations change, then there it will be applicable, right?
Even I mean, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, basically, why I ask, I'll be a little more clear that normally in physical system we don't see many switching behavior. This is why I'm asking. Yeah. Okay.
Well, wherever you do see switching behavior, you will have to apply this theory. That's my point. Okay. And for example, physicists have applied our theory in explaining the behavior of atomic force microscopes.
Yes.
So there have been many places where people have used physics. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other question? Well, wherever you see something odd happening, maybe you need to come to me. That's all. Okay, somebody is asking can you ask the question? Can somebody read out the question? I'm not reading.
So they're asking, how do we know which parameters to use to get the bifurcation diagram? Is it trial and error?
Is it?
Is it trial and error?
Which parameters?
Which parameters to use to get to the bifurcation diagram?
Well, normally in a system, there would be a few parameters that are changeable parameters, right? In a power electronic circuit, for example, the input voltage will change, like it or not, it will change because it comes from the power supply. There are systems where you can change it by now wherever you can change it, wherever you can set up an experiment where you can change it controllably. That is these are the things that you should try to see what happens if you change it. It is not trial and error. In a system, normally you do not have handle over all the parameters. You only have handle over a smaller number of parameters which you can change in an experimental situation. We normally use those as the variable parameters. Why is the determinant of the Jacobian related to stability? Okay. Well, if instead of one point, if you consider a collection of points, and you ask yourself that those collection of points says form a circle, and if I apply the map on all the points on the circle, what do I get? You'll normally get an ellipse. Now, that ellipse will be larger in volume than the initial circle if the determinant is bigger than 1. You get the point? So, a system is likely to be unstable if the determinant is bigger than 1, because it sort of expands, nearby initial condition expands. But not in all directions. In some direction, they might contract. Other directions, they might expand. But all that we can state is that the overall area will expand if the determinant is bigger than 1. Any other question? Okay, if there are no other questions, that might be, we can possibly wind up.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time to talk to us. This was a very interesting talk, and thank you to everyone for attending it. We hope you had a good time and you learned something new. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shobhit, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Soumitra. Missing the tea and coffees.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, quite a few faculty members attended it. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, bye then.